I came back from university with a whole clutch of songs, and I was working in Worcester at the textile factory, and so I started driving through to Cape Town on the weekends or Monday evenings to play at the Barleycorn Folk Club. And that was about 1975, I think. And I had these songs, satirical songs, and kind of social realism describing the town, and so I made a big impact. I was so different at that time, and I soon gained quite a large following in Cape Town, and then I was asked to perform at universities like UCT and Stellenbosch University and so on. So towards the end of the 70s, I had a fairly large cult following. And I thought, well, I must record my songs, because, I knew they weren't going to play them on the radio. That I knew.
Were they very politicized at that?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. But more in a kind of satirical way. A song like Chup Still, I wrote Chup Still, kind of a double-edged satire. In some ways mocking the English-speaking liberal, but also mocking the policeman. And songs like Botteltjie Blow, which were describing, some more social observation of, people living on the streets drinking methylated spirits. So it was hard. It was kind of hard realism that I was bringing realism into Afrikaans music. At that time, Afrikaans music was very sentimental. It was all sort of, it was Guy Kosten, Sonja Herold, it was Blommetjies and Mooi Strande. It was all very kind of, sweet and innocent, and as if, and yet we lived in this mad environment. It was kind of like Nazi Germany, where, carrying on as if none of the horrors around you were happening. So my style of writing was to start looking at that and bringing my experience of South Africa onto stage, and to also do it with humor, so that it wouldn't be too unacceptable. So what I learned from Dylan and from Woody Guthrie was that, your music needs to be rooted somewhere. And Dylan, rooted his music in the kind of folk mythology that was kind of lived by Woody Guthrie, and infused that with his more worldly view, through literature and poetry and so on. And I thought that was a good place to go. So what I did was I learned from them the methodology, not to imitate them. And I think that was always what was irritating me about other musicians, was the imitation, never really finding what it was they were trying to do, other than to sound like someone else. So the quest for my own voice and to express my own vision was what was always driving me. So what was the folk tradition? Did I have a folk tradition? Initially, I couldn't think, I couldn't identify with any folk music in South Africa other than Afrikaans folk music. So Afrikaans folk music was what I heard as a child, and I always sort of thought of it as, like boeremusiek. But then in the late 70s, when I started rethinking, looking at our history, and then looking at the lyrics of those songs again, it struck me that these songs weren't written by white people, and that these songs came from the farms. and that these songs, Bobbejaan klim die berg, om die boere te vererg, would never have been written by boere. These were songs that were written, or not written, they were created on the farms by either they came from slave times or they came from descendants of slavery. And then my imagination was fired up with that, and that gave me the freedom to start using Afrikaans as a language, because I, for many years, had stopped speaking Afrikaans as a political statement. I didn't speak Afrikaans. And I had no real interest certainly not in writing in Afrikaans. But when I discovered that that our history was so distorted, I became more and more inquisitive about how things had been hidden from us, and how to reconnect to that history, and how to expose the history through song, and to this very day, that's what I do in shows like District 6 and Kanala and Koos Sas, die Ballade van Koos Sas. All of these Guma, these are attempts to investigate what I think of as hidden history, and to speak for the people whose stories were suppressed by the regime.
And when Bachert was banned, I mean, was that a confirmation to you that you're doing the right thing, or was it a complete blow to you?
Well, I didn't, when I recorded Bachert, I really didn't think those songs were going to be played by the radio. So it came as no surprise to me that the SABC banned the album in its entirety. But there were songs on there that are hits today, Biscuits and Biltong, and you thought, well, what's wrong with that? I wasn't saying anything other than, but at the time I was mixing languages. I was using a street Afrikaans. I was everything that the government didn't want me to be in terms of Afrikaans identity. So it was no surprise, and it was, in some ways, it was great. I sold a gold record without ever having a song played on the radio. So that album went gold. And the only reason I had a hit on the radio was almost because of the banning, because my record label said to me, you've got to record something that we can get played on the radio. And I said, well, I've written a song about an old rugby player, Blokkie Joubert. Let's record that. They surely can't find anything wrong with that. And that became a #1 hit. And then the hits started to come after that. And,
one after the other.
Yeah, the Royal Hotel followed that.
And Volkswagen got hold of you. Was that when you were already...
I was quite a big name in the entertainment world. It was about 1983. I recorded and performed as David Kramer from 1980 until 1986. So it was a short period when I was very active and very well known. And then Volkswagen came along through the advertising agency, which was Rightford Siltrip Macon in those days, now Ogilvy Mather. And they knew me. They had been to see my concerts, and they thought that this everyman idea was a good way to connect South African identity to the Volksie bus. So I took over from Jeremy Taylor, who had written the first Volksie song. And they were looking for someone else to write a song like that because, I don't know, Jeremy Taylor didn't want to do the next one. And so I got involved with them. But on my terms, I said to them I would never be seen advocating, the sale of the bus. I would never say, this is a great bus, you've got to buy this bus. I was determined to be me stayed David Cromer and they stayed Volkswagen. And that relationship worked very well for both of us. Worked very, very well. And I did about 5 ads with them over a period of 13 years.
Not a
Every
lot,
2 years or so we did a new ad.
But you were planted here in all our minds through that commercial as well.
They were very popular. The ads were, they were beautifully made.
Clever, yeah.
And they were clever, they were funny, they were quirky. Well, I wasn't troubled by them. They were confused by me. You know, I confused them because I was singing these songs that they really liked. You know, the Royal Hotel, Bochum and Voetsek, Stanley and the Koei, those kind of songs, which you know, I wrote kind of socky dance music. So people were, you know, having a great time dancing to my songs. But then when they listened to the albums, there were other kinds of songs, which were saying all kinds of different things, you know. And particularly when I when I brought out Baboon Dogs in 1986, you know, it was overtly political. So people were kind of saying, yeah, you know, he's politics. He doesn't share our political views. So what would happen when I performed is that people who came to hear me, to hear particular kinds of songs, would be introduced to other kinds of songs, my more satirical or more political work, and would sometimes walk out, or were disgusted, you know, at what they, you know, that I was in some ways
betraying them.
Yeah, sort of betraying them or mocking them, or you know, there was a lot of questions being asked, but I was never confronted, other than by, you know, religious fanatics and people who prayed for me and, you know, told me I was on. But I was never physically threatened, no.